The first time I noticed something wrong with the city, it was so small I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A corner store I had walked past every morning on my way to work, its faded awning printed with the name of a family I swore had been there for decades, was suddenly a laundromat. No trace of the store, no familiar faces, not even a scrap of memory in the people hurrying by. I stood there too long, staring at the window as if I could force the memory back into existence, and the only thing I felt was the gnawing certainty that I hadn't dreamed it. Later that night, when I found the journal, the unease turned into something far heavier. I didn't find it in any obvious way. It wasn't mailed to me, or given by a stranger, or dropped on the sidewalk. It was simply there, sitting on my nightstand when I came home from work, its dark leather cover worn in a way that suggested it had lived longer than I had. There was no dust on it, though I knew it hadn't been there in the morning. I stared at it for a long time before I touched it. The air around it felt denser, as if the book had its own gravity. When I opened it, the first page was blank, but as I flipped forward, I found handwriting. My handwriting, in a style I used when I was younger, sharp and deliberate. The words described streets and buildings I recognized, but not quite as they were now. It was as if the journal was cataloging a version of the city that had already slipped away. One entry caught me. On the 17th, the southern block of Fairview will be gone. People will not remember it, except you. Trust no one who insists it was never there. My throat tightened as I read it again and again. Fairview was 5 minutes from my apartment. I closed the journal and shoved it under my bed, telling myself I was tired, maybe hallucinating. But the next day, I walked down Fairview out of restless fear. The block was intact. The bakery with the cracked window, the bookstore that still smelled of paper and ink, the apartment building with peeling paint. Everything was exactly where it should be. I laughed out loud at myself, embarrassed even though no one noticed. But then the 17th came. I woke up unsettled, the words from the journal echoing in my head. I told myself I wasn't going to check, that feeding the paranoia would only make it worse. Yet by noon I was there, walking down Fairview with my pulse hammering in my ears. And it was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, not rebuilt, just gone. In its place was an empty stretch of pavement, perfectly smooth, as though no building had ever stood there. The bakery, the bookstore, the apartments, all erased. Worse than that, the people moving past me didn't hesitate. They didn't stop, didn't glance at the empty space, didn't question why there was suddenly nothing where something had always been. I grabbed a man by the sleeve, desperation making my voice sharp. What was here? Do you remember? He looked at me with the bored patience of someone humoring a stranger. Nothing's here, he said, pulling free. It's just always been like this. I couldn't breathe. I walked the length of the block 3 times, hoping to see some trace of what I remembered, a scrap of wood, a piece of glass, anything. But the sidewalk was too clean, unnaturally clean, and I felt like I was walking on skin pulled tight over something hidden. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled the journal back out, turning through the pages with trembling hands. There were more entries, some dated in the future, some without dates at all. They described pieces of the city vanishing one by one, and always the warning. You will remember, no one else will. I stared at my own handwriting and wondered how it was possible. I hadn't written these words. I was certain of that, but every curve of every letter belonged to me. I read until my eyes blurred, until I felt the creeping sense that the room itself was thinner than it had been before, like the walls had shifted an inch outward. At dawn, I shoved the book into my backpack and left my apartment, not sure where I was going. Only that staying inside felt like suffocating. The streets were quiet, unusually so. I stopped at a cafe I had been to hundreds of times, ordered coffee, and tried to convince myself I was fine. But when the barista handed me the cup, she looked at me oddly. You're new around here, right? She asked. Haven't seen you before. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to tell her I came here 3 times a week, that she had served me dozens of times, but something in her face told me not to. I just nodded and stepped back out into the street. The city felt different then, though nothing had visibly changed. It was as if the memory of what had been was slipping from everyone else while I held it too tightly, burning myself with it. I sat on a bench and pulled out the journal. The next page was dated the 21st. The East Side station will vanish, it said. You will remember the trains, the announcements, the crowd. They will not. My hands shook. That was 4 days away. I closed the journal, pressing it against my chest like it might steady me, but all it did was pulse with a strange weight. I realized then that the book wasn't warning me, it was binding me. Every page was a chain, tethering me to memories no one else was allowed to keep. And as much as I wanted to throw it into the river, I couldn't. The leather felt warm, alive, as though it knew I would never let it go. When I finally lifted my eyes, the city seemed to ripple faintly, a shimmer along the buildings in the distance, like heat rising from asphalt. For the first time I understood with terrifying clarity, the city was not solid. It was unraveling, and I was the only one being forced to watch. For the next 4 days I lived in a fog of dread, every hour haunted by the words in the journal. The East Side Station will vanish. I replayed it in my head over and over, and each time the certainty grew heavier. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury myself in work, in conversations, in the dull rhythm of daily life, but nothing stuck. People's voices slipped past me like static. Screens and headlines blurred, meaningless. Even my own reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger wearing my face, someone who belonged to a city I no longer recognized. On the morning of the 21st, I woke early and rode the bus straight to the station, unable to stop myself. The ride felt endless, every bump and stop pulling me further into inevitability. When I stepped off, the station loomed as it always had, towering iron arches, peeling green paint, the steady churn of trains sliding in and out. People rushed past me, tickets in hand, coffee spilling, arguments rising and falling. Everything was normal, painfully normal, as if daring me to believe the journal was just a sick trick. I stood on the platform, my heart in my throat, staring at the clock as the minute hand crawled forward. At 11, a vibration passed through the ground, so subtle I thought it might be a train. But the track stayed still. The announcements cut off mid-word, and in the next breath, the sound died. No footsteps, no engines, no voices. Just silence, heavy and absolute. When I blinked, the station was gone. I was standing on a flat expanse of concrete that stretched unbroken in every direction. No tracks, no arches, no people. Just empty ground, smooth and gray, as though nothing had ever been there. I staggered, clutching the journal to my chest, my lungs clawing for air. My memory screamed with images of trains, of crowds, of the echoing tunnels beneath, but the world refused them. And then, the most horrifying part, I turned to a woman who had been standing near me only seconds before, her suitcase in hand. She looked around with mild confusion, then frowned and muttered, "Strange place for a bus stop," before walking away as though nothing had changed. Bus stop, not station, not trains. She believed, with absolute certainty, that it had always been this way. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the concrete, the journal pressed against my forehead. The entries were true, every word. And if they continued, piece by piece the city would disappear until nothing was left. That night, I tried to tell someone. My friend Daniel, someone I had trusted since we were kids. I thought if anyone would listen, it would be him. We met in a small diner, and I told him everything, from the store that became a laundromat to the station vanishing beneath my feet. He stared at me for a long time, then laughed nervously. "You've been working too hard," he said. "Stress does weird things. Maybe see a doctor, get some rest." I slammed the journal down on the table, flipping it open to the page with the station. "Read it. It's right there, in my own handwriting, and I didn't write it. How do you explain that?" He leaned back, uneasy, his eyes scanning the words before pushing the book back toward me. "This is creepy, sure. But maybe you did write it and don't remember. Sleepwalking, dissociation, I don't know. There's always an explanation." His voice cracked at the edges, betraying fear. Not fear of the journal, but fear of me. "Daniel," I said, lowering my voice. "You were at the station last week. You bought us tickets. You remember?" His face went blank, polite. "There hasn't been a train station in this city for decades," he said. "You're scaring me." I felt the world tilt under me, as if the floor had dissolved. I left the diner without another word, the journal heavy in my backpack. For the first time, I felt completely severed from the people around me. They were not wrong. I was not right. We lived in different realities, overlapping only by accident, and that overlap was shrinking. By the next morning, there was a new entry. On the 24th, the hospital on 9th will vanish. Do not be inside. My hands shook as I read it. My mother worked there. I called her immediately, begging her to take a few days off, to leave the building, to trust me. She laughed gently, the way she always did when I worried too much. I can't just leave, sweetheart. Patients need me. I'll be fine. Nothing I said mattered. She dismissed it all as paranoia. I went to the hospital that day, tried to drag her out, but the security guards pulled me back. She looked at me with something I had never seen before, pity. Get help, she whispered. Please. On the 24th, I stood across the street, heart hammering. At 3:10, the air thickened. The hum I had felt before returned, vibrating through my bones. And then the hospital was gone. The block was an open field, grass growing where concrete should have been. The cars swerved around it without pause, drivers unbothered, as though there had never been a building there. I screamed until my throat tore, but no one turned. The journal slid from my hands, pages fluttering open, and for the first time I noticed faint words written along the margins, words I hadn't seen before. If you want answers, follow the erasures. My tears blurred the ink, but I understood. The book wasn't just telling me what would vanish. It was pointing me towards something, some hidden pattern beneath the city's collapse. That night, I didn't sleep. I traced the entries, the dates, the locations, laying them out on a map until my desk was covered. The vanishing places formed a line, jagged but deliberate, cutting through the heart of the city like a scar. And at the end of the line, circled in trembling ink, was a place I hadn't been since I was a child. The library. My pulse raced as I marked it, my mind split between terror and something else, anticipation. If the pattern was real, if the journal was guiding me, then whatever waited at the library was the reason I still remembered. The reason I was cursed to carry the weight of two realities while everyone else lived blind. As the clock struck midnight, I closed the journal and whispered to myself the one truth I could no longer deny. I was not reading a warning. I was being led. I hadn't stepped inside the old library in nearly 20 years, not since elementary school field trips when we shuffled in lines past towering shelves and whispered about ghosts in the basement. Back then it had seemed impossibly large, endless rows of dusty tomes, a place where secrets waited just out of reach. Now, standing before it again, I was stunned to see it looked untouched. The city had changed 100 times over, but the library remained the same red brick and arched windows, as if the vanishing had skipped it deliberately. My chest tightened as I pushed the door open and the scent of paper and dust washed over me, a smell so strong and familiar it made my eyes sting. The lobby was deserted, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above. Rows of shelves stretched into shadow, and I swore the air itself held its breath, like the building knew why I was there. I opened the journal. The entries from before were the same, unchanged, but along the margins new lines appeared, almost invisible unless I tilted the page just right. Downstairs. Second aisle. Fourth shelf. My throat went dry. The journal wasn't just predicting anymore. It was directing me. I forced my legs to move, my footsteps echoing too loudly as I crossed the marble floor. The stairwell yawned at the far end, leading to the basement archives. Each step down seemed heavier than the last, as though the air thickened with every breath. When I reached the bottom, the lights flickered once, then steadied, casting the rows of shelves in pale yellow glow. Second aisle. Fourth shelf. I counted with shaking hands, my pulse hammering in my ears. When I reached the spot, my gaze locked on a thin, leather-bound book with no title. The moment my fingers brushed it, I heard a voice behind me. I was wondering when you'd come. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. A man stood at the edge of the aisle, leaning casually against the shelf as though he had been waiting there all along. He wore a dark coat, his hair streaked with gray, eyes sharp but tired. "Who are you?" I demanded, clutching the book to my chest. He smiled faintly. "Like you, I remember. Name's Elias." The sound of his voice hit me like a jolt. Someone else who remembered. My knees nearly gave out with the relief of it. You know about the vanishing?" His smile faded. "I know more than that. I know what's coming." He gestured at the journal still clutched in my other hand. "It led you here, didn't it? That means it's chosen you." My mouth went dry. Chosen me for what? Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. "To decide how much of this world survives, and how much disappears." My grip tightened on the books, panic rising. "You're saying I'm doing this?" Not directly, he said softly. But your choices determine the pattern. Every time you turn the page, every time you follow its instructions, you anchor the path it takes. That's why you still remember. The book needs you to witness what it erases. The words sank like stones in my stomach. I thought of my mother, gone with the hospital, her absence swallowed by everyone but me. If that's true, I whispered, then I killed her. Elias's expression softened, almost fatherly. No, you didn't write the pattern. You're caught in it, same as me. The only choice we have left is whether to fight it or finish it. I wanted to scream, to deny every word, but deep down I knew he was right. I had felt it the moment the first store vanished, the pull, the weight, the invisible hand guiding me forward. And now it had delivered me to Elias, the only other person cursed, or blessed, with memory. I forced myself to look at him. Why me? He gave a bitter laugh. Because you opened it. Once you see the words, once you read them, you're bound. Same as I was. And what happened to you? His eyes darkened. I lost everything. A wife who no longer remembers me. Children erased with their school. Whole neighborhoods gone while I screamed myself hoarse. And yet, like you, I couldn't stop following it. He nodded toward the untitled book in my hands. That's the key. The one they don't want you to find. It explains what the journal really is. My hands trembled as I opened the leather cover. Inside, the pages were filled with dense handwriting, diagrams, maps of the city with thick lines crossing through certain blocks. My eyes caught on a phrase written over and over again. Memory is the last defense. Elias placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. This is the truth. The vanishing isn't random. It's a collapse. Our city sits on a fracture between realities, and the journal is the thread pulling it apart. We either cut the thread or get pulled with it. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, shadows lurching across the walls. The journal in my bag grew warm, as though reacting to the other book in my hands. Elias's face tightened. It knows we're here. We don't have much time. My thoughts spun, crashing against one another. My mother gone. The station gone. Whole lives erased while strangers walked past without care. And now Elias telling me I had to choose between fighting the journal or letting it finish what it started. My stomach turned. How do we fight it? I asked. His eyes met mine, grim and unwavering. We go to the fracture itself, the place where all these vanishings converge. If we destroy the journal there, maybe, just maybe, the collapse stops. He took a step back, his voice lower. But if we fail, the rest of the city goes with us. The lights flared, then snapped off completely, plunging the basement into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen stayed dead. In the silence, I heard it, the faint, rhythmic hum that had preceded every erasure. Elias grabbed my arm. It's starting again. We have to move. My pulse thundered as we stumbled through the dark, clutching the two books like lifelines. Somewhere above us, the library groaned, shelves rattling as though the building itself was about to fold. And in that moment, I understood with gut-deep certainty. This wasn't just about saving a city anymore. It was about choosing which version of reality deserved to survive. The air in the basement cracked like a sheet of ice shattering, a low rumble spreading through the floor as dust rained from the ceiling. Elias pulled me toward the stairs, his grip iron tight, his eyes darting toward the trembling shelves. If it takes the library, it'll take us with it, he hissed, and together we stumbled upward in near darkness, the faint glow from emergency lights barely enough to see. My chest burned, each step a battle against the weight pressing down, as though the building itself resented our escape. When we burst into the main hall, I saw the marble floor warping, tiles bending inward like a whirlpool. My legs froze, but Elias yanked me forward. "Don't look at it," he shouted. I tore my gaze away, clutching the journal against my chest, feeling it pulse like a second heart. We shoved through the doors into the night air. For a moment, I thought we had escaped, but when I turned back, the library was gone. Not crumbled, not destroyed, just gone. In its place was a smear of white light that lingered for a heartbeat before fading into empty space, leaving only a vacant lot surrounded by flickering streetlights. I gasped, the shock of it hitting me harder than I expected. Another place I had known since childhood, erased as if it had never been. "We don't have much time," Elias said, his voice ragged but steady. "It's accelerating." We hurried down the street, but every block we crossed, I felt the city bending wrong. The lights flickered in rhythm with the low hum that grew stronger, vibrating in my teeth. Cars at the curb shimmered, their outlines doubling like bad reflections, and the air tasted metallic. I caught sight of a woman on the corner holding her child's hand, and my stomach lurched as the child blinked out for half a second, then back again. Neither seemed to notice. Elias saw it too, his jaw tight. "The fracture's close," he said. "Closer than I thought." We ducked into an alley where the hum softened, shielded by brick walls. My head spun as I tried to catch my breath. How do we even find the fracture? What if it's not real? Elias's eyes burned into me. "It's real, and the journal will take us there." He pointed to the one in my hands. "It's already been guiding you. You know it." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Every vanishing, every direction, it wasn't chance. The journal had been dragging me toward this. My voice cracked. And if it wants to collapse? If following it just finishes the job? Elias didn't blink. "Then we'll stop it before it does. But if we don't go, everything ends anyway. At least this way we have a chance." He reached into his coat and pulled out the loose page he had stolen from my journal earlier. He held it up, showing me the image again. A street torn open, light pouring through the cracks. Only this time the lines had spread wider, buildings leaning inward as if drawn into a vortex. "It's a map," he said quietly. "And it's happening tonight." His conviction should have steadied me, but instead I felt my knees shake. My mother's face flashed in my mind, the last time I saw her before the hospital winked out of existence. I wondered if she was still alive in some other version, or if she had simply unraveled into nothing. The thought burned like acid. "Fine," I whispered. "Then show me where it ends." We moved quickly, weaving through half-empty streets, passing strangers who glanced through us like we were half there already. The hum grew louder, bleeding into every sound, and the journal grew heavier, dragging at my arm. At one point I swore it whispered, words I couldn't quite catch, like a breath against my ear. Elias noticed my flinch. "Don't listen to it," he warned. "It will try to use your fear against you." His words were meant to steady me, but the more he spoke, the more I wondered if I could trust him. What if he wasn't an ally at all? What if the journal had led me to him for a reason? My doubts gnawed at me until we reached the intersection at 12th and Brant. I froze. The street ahead was split wide open, not with rubble or cracks, but with a jagged wound of pure white light, stretching for blocks. Buildings leaned inward, their edges trembling, windows flickering like dying screens. The air buzzed with electricity, hair on my arms rising. People walked past without noticing, their bodies phasing slightly, as if the fracture didn't exist to them. I staggered forward, heart pounding. "This is it," Elias whispered. "The heart of it all." His face looked older in the glow, shadows deepening the lines around his mouth. "Once we're inside, there's no turning back." I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. "And if we fail?" He met my gaze, unflinching. "Then this city ends. And maybe every version of it too." The journal burned hot in my hands, pages fluttering as if caught in invisible wind. One line scrawled itself across the paper before my eyes. "Step into the fracture." My pulse roared in my ears. My every instinct screamed to run, to throw the journal into the light and flee, but my legs refused to move. Elias placed a hand on my shoulder. "We go together. It's the only way." His words steadied me, but a bitter thought lingered. If he had been bound by the journal before, how did I know he wasn't leading me straight into its will? The fracture pulsed brighter, the ground shaking beneath us. Around us, the city began to flicker, storefronts flashing in and out like faulty signals. A man across the street screamed as the sidewalk dissolved beneath him, his body stretching thin before snapping back into solidity. No one else reacted. No one saw. My stomach twisted, but I knew the choice had already been made. I stepped forward, the journal burning in my grip. Elias followed close, his hand steady on my back. The hum became deafening, the light swallowing the world until all I could see was white. For one terrifying instant, I thought this was the end. Then the ground gave way, and we fell. The fall was endless yet instant, a plunge through silence that pressed against my chest until I thought my ribs might crack. Then, with a violent jolt, the white dissolved, and I slammed onto cold stone. The journal flew from my grip, pages scattering across the floor like dead leaves in wind. I gasped for air, the chill of the ground seeping through my palms as I pushed myself upright. Elias landed a heartbeat later, rolling onto his side and groaning, but he was alive. We were not in the city anymore. Above us stretched a ceiling too vast to comprehend, arched and lined with shifting symbols that pulsed faintly, reshaping themselves whenever I tried to focus. The chamber was circular, endless, and impossibly tall, walls formed not of brick or concrete, but of some reflective material that shimmered between mirror and water. A low vibration filled the space, deeper than the city's hum, resonating in my bones. My eyes fell on the journal where it had landed. Its pages were no longer blank. Dozens of entries filled them now, written in handwriting that was sometimes mine, sometimes Elias's, and sometimes something entirely alien, the words curling into shapes I couldn't parse. I picked it up with shaking hands, scanning a fresh line that formed as I watched. One must be the anchor. One must be the sacrifice. The words drained the blood from my face. Elias, I whispered, showing him. He stared, jaw clenched, then tore his gaze away. It's always been like this. Every collapse ends with a choice. That's why the journals exist, to make someone choose. His voice cracked with fury. But it doesn't have to be you. My stomach nodded. You knew? I accused. You knew this was coming. His silence was answer enough. I stumbled back, the chamber spinning. You used me to carry it here, to play my part. He raised his hands, eyes blazing but desperate. No, I brought you here because you're the only one who can stop it. You've seen the vanishing longer than anyone else. You resisted it when others couldn't. That means something. My voice trembled. Or it just means I was stubborn enough to survive. The chamber brightened suddenly, lights spilling from cracks in the mirrored walls. Through them, I glimpsed fragments of other cities, streets I recognized, buildings that had already vanished, people frozen mid-step. Every reflection showed a different version, flickering like channels in a broken television. Some were bright and thriving, others ruined and empty, but all of them were threaded together by the same low vibration. Elias followed my gaze, his voice low. These are the branches. Every city, every version, connected here. If this place collapses, they all do. Do you understand now why the journals matter? My throat tightened. And the anchor? The sacrifice? He turned back to me, eyes wet. The anchor holds reality together. The sacrifice seals the fracture by vanishing into it. Without both, nothing survives. My breath caught. It wasn't a choice. It was a trap disguised as one. The journal shook in my hands, words bleeding across the pages faster than I could read, until one line burned through everything else. Choose now. The walls trembled, cracks widening, light spilling in sharp beams that sliced across the floor. Elias stepped closer. I'll do it, he said quickly. I should have gone long ago. I'm already tied to this place. Let me end it. My heart lurched, but I couldn't bring myself to trust his selflessness. Or maybe you're just trying to survive another loop? I shot back. He flinched as though struck. You think I haven't paid enough already? Every time this has happened, I've lost everything. Friends, family, myself. Do you think I wanted this? His anger broke, leaving raw grief in its place. Please, don't let it take you too. For a moment, the chamber seemed to close in, every reflection watching, waiting. I looked down at the journal, my own name flickering across one page, his across another, alternating so quickly I couldn't tell which was true. My hands shook. I thought of my mother, of the hospital swallowed in silence. I thought of the strangers in the city walking blind through their vanishing world. I thought of the possibility that somewhere out there, another version of me was making the same decision. My chest burned. If I anchor, I whispered, I stay. I watch everything vanish. If I sacrifice, my voice cracked. I disappear. Elias nodded, tears brimming. Yes, but whichever role you take, I'll take the other. You don't have to do this alone. The journal grew hot, searing my skin. The symbols on the walls began to bleed into each other, merging into one blinding glow. The floor split, a jagged wound of light opening beneath us. We didn't have long. I closed my eyes, pressing the journal to my chest. For one fragile second, silence fell, and I felt every version of me across the reflections, angry, afraid, determined, all waiting for this choice. I opened my eyes, meeting Elias's gaze. Then it ends here. I stepped toward the light. His breath hitched, but he followed. Together, he said, voice steady. The journal wrote one final line as the ground dissolved beneath us. Balance requires loss. We fell again, but this time I wasn't afraid. The chamber split apart, every reflection shattering into white. My scream caught in my throat, not of terror but of release, as the choice locked into place. The hum roared, the light swallowed everything, and I felt myself pulled apart and remade in the same heartbeat. When the light dimmed, I thought for a heartbeat that nothing remained, that I had slipped into some hollow where even silence couldn't breathe. Then my chest rose, air rushing in sharp and heavy, and I opened my eyes. I stood at the edge of the city, though it was no longer the one I knew. The skyline was fractured, towers bent like molten glass, streets curling inward as if they resisted being remembered. The hum was gone, replaced by a stillness so complete it made my ears ring. In my hands the journal was weightless, its pages blank once more. I turned in a slow circle, expecting to see Elias, but there was only emptiness where he should have stood. My stomach twisted. Had he taken the other role? Had he been erased so that I could anchor this broken version? The answer was nowhere, only the white scars running through the city like cracks in glass. I stumbled forward, each step heavier than the last, until I reached the center of what had been the square. People lingered there, or rather shadows of them, blurred outlines frozen in place, like sketches abandoned mid-stroke. Their faces shifted when I looked too long, expressions melting between grief and indifference. I called out, but none answered. The journal vibrated faintly in my grip. Words bled across the first page in crooked lines. Balance requires witness. My throat went dry. I wasn't the sacrifice. I was the anchor. My role wasn't to vanish, but to remain, to carry the weight of what had been lost. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the cracked pavement, tears burning hot down my cheeks. Elias had gone into the fracture, and I was left behind to remember. The words cut deeper with every breath. Somewhere, maybe in countless somewheres, there was a version of him still alive, still walking, still searching, but not here. Here he was gone, and I was the one bound to the echoes. The city around me flickered. In one heartbeat it was whole, bustling with life. In the next it was hollow, towers half dissolved, streets crumbling into dust. I could see them both at once, the before and the after, layered so closely I couldn't tell which was real. My pulse raced as the journal flipped open again, pages turning in frantic bursts until it landed on a single scrawled line. Do not close the book. The implication tightened my chest. If I kept it open, the memory would remain, fragile but alive. If I closed it, everything, the city, Elias, even myself, might dissolve into the white. My hands shook violently, the weight of decision pressing harder than before. My voice cracked as I whispered into the still air, "What if I can't?" But no answer came. I looked up at the fractured skyline, the strange light bending through broken towers, and I thought of every choice that had led here. The night I found the journal. The friends who turned their backs when I told them about the vanishing. The long days pretending I could still belong to a world already slipping away. And Elias, stubborn, furious, loyal in his own warped way. He had given himself to the fracture. I had not stopped him. Perhaps this was the price. Perhaps this was the point. My tears blurred the words until they swam across the page. I held the journal tighter, refusing to close it, and the city steadied. The outlines of people grew firmer, their motion sluggish but real, like actors moving through syrup. Somewhere above, the sky stitched itself into a deep and endless blue. For one impossible moment, it almost looked like salvation. Then the page shifted again, one final sentence bleeding through, witness or vanish. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my breath trembling. I could walk away now, let the city crumble while I fled into whatever remained. Or I could stand, book open, and keep it here with me, even if it meant binding myself to this fractured reality forever. The silence pressed harder, waiting for my answer. Slowly I stood, legs unsteady, and lifted the journal toward the warped skyline. My voice broke, but did not falter. Then I'll stay. The ground shuddered beneath me, a ripple coursing through the square. The shadows solidified into people, faces I knew, faces I didn't, moving once more, oblivious to how close they had come to erasure. The cracks in the towers mended halfway, never fully whole, but strong enough to stand. The hum did not return, but the stillness became less suffocating, as if the city exhaled. The journal's pages glowed faintly, the words fading into pale scars, no longer demanding but acknowledging. I was the anchor, bound here, unseen by the people I saved, but unable to step away. The knowledge seared through me like fire, but beneath it pulsed something quieter, steadier: resolve. Elias's name echoed in my mind, not as loss, but as proof. His sacrifice had mattered. Mine did too. And though no one else might ever know, I knew. I snapped the journal shut. The world froze, just for a breath, as if startled. Then the pages burned away in my hands, scattering as ash into the air, dissolving before they could touch the ground. My chest ached, hollow and infinite, but I did not fall. The city stood. I turned, facing the horizon where broken towers reached for the sky, and for the first time I understood the true cost of balance. It wasn't victory. It wasn't survival. It was staying behind when every part of you longed to follow. The silence stretched, endless, and I walked forward into it, the weight of witness heavier than any chain.